This week on the Cycling News Show, is it okay to sit on a pro rider's wheel while they're descending on a training ride? We discuss Alpkit, the UK outdoor retailer who also owns Zonda bikes, going into administration and possibly out of it again. We've got an update on UAE's misfortunes as they suffer a little bit more again in the desert in Saudi Arabia. And breaking news, we have got the wildcard entries into the 2026 Tour de France. Hey folks, welcome to the Ride and Thrive podcast with me, your host, Dave Shields. Feeling a little bit croaky today, guys. I cannot lie. I've been trying to get rid of a cold. It's a bit of a nasally thing, so we're going to go with it, and hopefully it won't cause you too much discomfort in your ears. So, first up then, we have got Jonas Vingegaard. Now, here's the story. He was out on a training ride near Malaga in Spain, and he was descending, and a member of the public out cycling, a keen amateur cyclist, jumps on his back wheel and sticks to him as he's going down this descent. Jonas kind of, I don't know, maybe tried to drop him or get him off his wheel, and in the process of doing that, he crashes into the barriers. And according to Team Visma Lisa bike, he didn't do that much damage, but there are reports of people who saw him, Jonas, that he did have a bloodied face. Now, there are two sides to this story. So I'm going to cover the rider's side first, the amateur cyclist. Now, his name was, if I remember, Pedro Fernandez, I think. And basically, what he was saying is that he's got a right to his local roads. He was just out cycling. He's got a right to be out on the roads as much as anyone else. And he also has a right to sit on the wheel of anyone he likes. Now, he did say that he would have moved off his wheel had he not wanted him on there. But, the fact that he was a pro rider, didn't wash with him. It's a public road, and, he had every right to be there. In fact, he was a little bit upset and a little bit disgruntled that Jonas was so angry at him, because apparently he'd stopped to ask him if he needed help when he'd come off his bike, and he angrily dismissed him. And, so now I think the main thing for me on this side, from the rider's point of view, he did post it on Strava, and obviously put his comments on Strava as well. And so that's how we know what his side of the story is. Now, we don't really know from Jonas, and we will probably never know what had really happened. There was some comments on the Strava account that were saying the guy had posted pictures of Jonas from behind, and he was about sort of 10 meters. He wasn't right on his wheel. He was about 10 or 15 meters behind him. And that the fact that if he'd had time to stop to ask him if he was okay when he come off, he couldn't have been that close behind him. So there was that side of it. Now, Visma have come out and said, please respect our riders when they're out on the roads. They are doing their training. That is their job. That is their livelihoods. And, give them the space and respect. Something that maybe this other guy, this Pedro Fernandez, that he, doesn't believe they should have that. Okay, so where do I stand on this for my two penneth worth on this? I'm kind of in agreement with Visma. It's quite unusual. It's a unique thing in sport, especially professional sport, that their training ground is the open road. That is where they have to do their training. That is where all the rides are. So that's where they have to do the training. So there's that. They have to be out on those roads. And I don't know, you could liken it to an amateur footballer, gate crash in a training ground and trying to tackle Mo Salah or somebody, causing him an injury. And you just wouldn't do it, wouldn't dream of doing it. You'd respect the professionals going about their training. What I think really happened, probably, is thinking this guy saw Jonas out on the road, got really excited and thought, I'm going to follow him, see if I can stick up with him, and stick with him on the descent. And then Jonas thought, oh God, who's this on my wheel? I'm bloody going to get rid of him. I don't want him on my wheel. So he tries to go all out to show him, and I'll show you type thing. And he comes off his bike. So he's going to be a little bit embarrassed, a little bit disgruntled himself and probably quite annoyed, and then try and blame the guy for harassing him, So a bit of both, I guess. Jonas is on a training ride, as we've said, and I think he should be able to do that in peace and quiet. It could have been a zone 1 or a zone 2 where he didn't have to go fast. And to be fair, he could have just sat up and let this guy just go past, or waved him past, like say, oh, you go, mate, off you go. I'm on a training ride. You just don't know what goes on in the heat of the moment. So I think out of all this, we're lucky, really, and I'm so glad that there's nothing major. Visma has said there's nothing major up with Jonas. He had a bloodied face, but he's actually no broken bones or anything like that. So he's come out of it virtually unscathed. So a little bit of an exciting story, but a bit of a storm in a teacup, I guess. And this guy's had his moment in the limelight as well, posting on Strava. I don't really agree with that, and it's another one of those things. Maybe that was what was going through his head. This will look great on me Strava. Keeping up with Jonas Vingegaard. So I don't know. For those of you who don't know, Jonas Vingegaard is probably one of the best Grand Tour riders of the current generation, notwithstanding Tadej Pogačar. So he is a cycling superstar. So this is quite a big deal. It would be. You're talking the Messi and the Ronaldo of football, in cycling sort of thing. So, quite a big story. But, all's well that ends well, I guess. Next up then, we've got Alpkit. Now, a little bit of a sad story, but hopefully with a happy ending. Now, Alpkit are a UK outdoor retailer who are quite close to my heart. And they are also the owner of Sonder bikes. Now, Alpkit have been around since, I'm thinking, the early 2000s. I think about 2004 or 5. And they are a brand that are quite close to my heart, which is why I included this story. Now, they first came about there's a few lads from just outside the Peaks, I think they set up, just to try and make and sell quality outdoor products that didn't cost the earth. They were fed up with having to pay, half your rent money just to buy a waterproof jacket. And this is something I can, fully buy into. In the outdoor industry, if you're working in the outdoor industry, like I was working in the outdoor industry, and I was leading groups and stuff in the big mountains and out in the Lake District, and the cost of the cost of the stuff to do that, the waterproofs and all the kits, was really prohibitively expensive. And the thing is, working in the industry, there's no money in it. You get paid, quite cheap for the job you do. And the idea is that you do it because you love it, which is fine, which is the case. I did it because I loved it, not for the money. However, you're out there, you need the kit, but you can't afford it. And I think that was the crux of these guys who had decided to make this kit and start Alpkit. So I remember in the early days, they were making these like sleeping bags that were down sleeping bags, 4-season, really lightweight, and they were retailing for around about £100. I think they were called a Pipe Dream or maybe something like that. And £100 for these sleeping bags that, if you were to buy the equivalent from big manufacturer like Rab or Mountain Equipment, they'd be costing you £300 or £400. So they really were, making big waves in the outdoor industry, and they expanded. They got bigger and bigger, and they opened shops. There was a shop in Keswick and in the Peaks. I think Hathersage. There's shops all over. Ambleside, I think there's one. So they got shops all over the place, and I really like them as a retailer. I love their ethos. Just get out there and do it type ethos of adventure. And, not being prohibited by the cost of kits. So, adventure for all, I guess. Now, as is the thing with all these brands, the more they get established, the more that the more people buy into it, and the bigger it gets, the shareholders and all the rest of it. it gets harder and harder to try and keep the cost down, and gradually the costs do go up. But they ended up going into administration, and they were blaming a number of factors for this. First of all, there was the prohibitive cost of loans and post-COVID recovery loans and all that. Then just general rising costs, the costs of doing business in the UK, it got really expensive. And then manufacturing, everything else goes up. So all the cost goes up, and they were struggling to sell the kit at the price they wanted to for the cost it took to manufacture it. So they've ended up going into administration, including their bike brand Sonder as well, which was really sad. Almost immediately, they had a bit of interest from an investor who wanted to put some money into it and keep the brand going. And this doesn't surprise me, because it is quite a popular brand with quite a bit of a cult following really in the UK, certainly. And they've stepped in, and it looks like they've managed to save all the jobs, all the stores, business as usual. The investor is really keen on the brand message and wants to build it up and support them through the tough times. So I think they're going to look for alternative places to manufacture, to try and get the costs down on manufacturing, and try and source some cheaper materials, and try and just make the business a little bit more leaner and a little bit more viable as a business. So a sad start, but hopefully a happy ending for Alpkit and Sonder bikes. Okay, so I'll keep you abreast of any developments in that story, but for now, fingers crossed, a happy ending to that story. Next up, we've got Team UAE Emirates. They've had a little bit of good luck, winning the Tour Down Under at the start of the year, but they've had quite a bit of misfortune as well. Okay, so first of all, there was Jonathan Vingegaard, who suffered an injury, went down quite hard. Didn't really see the crash. I mentioned it last week on the podcast on stage 4 of the Tour Down Under, and he had to give that up. He had to abandon the tour, and he suffered several fractured thoracic vertebrae on that one. So he's going to be out for a while, which was unfortunate. And then we had Jay Vine, who actually won the overall GC of the Tour Down Under, which was good. But he was involved in an incident with another rider, Mikkel Berg, and that was involving the kangaroo, which I also mentioned last week. It was a bit of a bizarre incident. And Jay Vine went on, carried on, finished the race, and did enough to secure the GC. However, after the race, he started complaining. His hand was a bit sore, and he went and got it x-rayed, and he's fractured it. So that was another bit of bad luck there. And then we have got the Alula Tour, which is in Saudi Arabia, and their woes, unfortunately, have continued out there as well. So we've got Jan Christen, who had a couple of crashes on the first stage, and he was one of the main contenders for the race as well. And he ended up getting a time penalty, I think, because he was being drafted back onto the peloton, I think. But not a good look for them. And then on stage 3 of the Alula Tour in Saudi, there was quite a big crash, a high-speed crash. They reported the guys were doing around about 100 kilometres an hour on this descent. And I think it was David Stella of UAE that came off his bike first. His kind of front wheel just went from under him. He did understeer into a corner, and the front wheel just kind of went under. He went underneath it, slid off his bike, which looked horrific. And the accident, the pictures of the accident afterwards, he tore off. I've never seen road rash like it. He tore off all his shorts, his bib shorts, and his back, was all ripped. His top was all ripped, and yeah, it looked horrendous. There was a couple of other riders that were involved in that accident as well. Lauren Rex from Soudal Quickstep was involved, and Fabian Grelier from Total Energies as well was involved. So yeah, I think there's a few broken bones in there and stuff, but you know the riders were up and walking after the accident. It was on quite a remote corner, so there was a bit of runoff, but there was also a few rocks there as well that they potentially to run into. They slid for quite a long time. Imagine going at that speed. You know, it'd be like, you know, jumping out of a car doing, you know, 40 mile an hour. It's just, it doesn't even bear thinking about with, you know, with just a really thin materials they've got on. So UAE are being a little bit pragmatic about this. You know, they're saying, you know, they're wishing well on social media to all their riders, and just saying they've had a bit of a tough start to the season, but, you know, they've got to carry on. It's onwards and upwards. They've got a big squad. You know, they've got lots of talented riders, so hopefully it won't impact them too much, and they can keep their winning ways up and, you know, be real contenders this year alongside Visma. However, you know, we do wish, you know, the best of wishes to all the riders. Hopefully they get recovered and back on their bike soon enough. These riders, they are tough, and they do seem to bounce back pretty quickly, or they do have some really great people to look after them. So yeah, best wishes to all those guys. Finally this week then, hot off the press, we've got the 2026 wildcard entries for the Tour de France, and there's been a few expected teams that what we expected. However, there's been one omission that we didn't expect and one addition which we didn't expect. So we'll go into those now. So first of all, the expected ones. So there are the way it happens with the wildcard entries. So you've got the two divisions. You know, you've got like the pro teams, the WorldTour pro teams. Then you've got the next tier down, if you like, the sort of second division, and a few of those teams get picked to go into the World Tour race, the Grand Tours, and the ones that get an automatic pick are the ones that have enough points and have done well in 2025. They will get an automatic entry into the Grand Tours. So that was the likes of Pinarello Q36.5. They've got an automatic entry, which is, if you remember from a few weeks ago, Tom Pidcock's team. We've got Cofidis, and we've also got, what's the other team? Tudor Pro Cycling. Now they have just taken on board Julian Alaphilippe, so as their big riders. So they're all in. Now, one of the big omissions was Unibet Rose Rockets. Everyone had expected that they are a French registered team. Everyone had expected that they would be getting a wildcard entry into the Tour de France, but they've not. They've been overlooked this time. Christian Prudhomme have said, you know, well, he's basically said, even though they're registered in France, they're not a full-on French team. They've got more Dutch riders in, but also that he just didn't think they'd done enough and they're not really ready for the Grand Tour. Maybe it's one for the future for them. They'll be keeping an eye on them. So they've been omitted. Now, in their place, the team that has taken their place is a Spanish team. I've got to get this right. It's Caja Rural Seguros RGA. There you go. Now, so they are a Spanish team, and they have I think they finished fourth in the Vuelta last year. The team rankings. So you know they've got a bit of history there with Grand Tours. So obviously they've done enough to get in. So it is their inaugural debut into the Tour. So it'll be good to see a new team there and see how they go. Okay, folks, that's it for this week. Thanks very much for tuning in. A new studio, which is basically my kitchen. So yeah, hopefully that, trying out a few different things. Tune in next week for some more cycling news. If you've got any comments, especially on the on the Jonas Vingegaard story, what would you do? What would you have done? And do you think that Jonas is in his right, should be out there on his own? Or do you believe, like the amateur rider, that he's fair game, he's out on the public roads, and he's fair game just like anyone else? Now, I'd be interested to know your comments on that. Okay, folks, that's it from me. Bye for now.